I had an experience in Yellowstone that shook me so badly, I'm still trying to figure out how to process it. I planned this trip for months with my wife, Kelly, because Yellowstone always seemed like the perfect getaway. We love to watch wildlife, photograph the geysers, and just let the stress of normal life float away. We decided on Madison Campground because it's usually quiet that time of year. I remember joking that the most trouble we'd face would be from nosy chipmunks. Little did I know, we'd end up trapped in our camper, terrified by something that felt more sinister than any wild animal I've ever encountered. That evening, everything started off normal. We set up our small camper near some trees not far from the Madison River. Around 8 p.m., we cooked burgers on our grill. The sun was going down, and the sky turned an amazing shade of pink. The combination of fresh mountain air and the faint smell of sulfur from the hot springs always gave me a weird sense of calm. Maybe it's because it reminds me of my childhood trips to national parks with my grandparents. We cleaned up around 9:30, stowed all the food inside so we wouldn't attract bears, and then we climbed in for the night. It was calm, with the occasional distant rumble from a geyser or the murmur of people settling into other campsites. But by midnight, everything changed. I was half awake, hearing this odd knocking sound from outside. It wasn't like branches snapping. It was more like someone, or something, tapping a knuckle against the side of our camper. It came in these strange, irregular intervals. Tap, then a pause, then 2 quick taps. I could feel my heartbeat pick up. Kelly stirred next to me. She whispered, "Do you hear that?" I lied and said I thought it was the wind. But truthfully, I was already uneasy. About half an hour later, I heard what sounded like whispering, but it seemed to come from different directions. One moment, it felt like it was near the window, then maybe near the door, then under the camper. It was as if multiple voices, soft and raspy, were surrounding us, trying to draw us outside. Kelly and I locked eyes in the darkness, and I could see she was just as scared as I was. We stayed silent, pretending to sleep, but my whole body was tense. Then something new began. A faint, almost melodic hum started outside. It was so quiet at first, I wasn't sure if I was imagining it, but gradually it got louder, like some twisted lullaby. I can't even describe it well, like a low chanting, but with words that made no sense. I had the strangest feeling it was beckoning us, testing our curiosity. I almost convinced myself to open the window and shout, "Who's there?" But instinct took over. Something in me, maybe a primal survival instinct, screamed that if I confronted this presence, it would be exactly what it wanted. That's when I heard the moaning sound. It was a guttural noise, a deep moan that rose and fell like someone in pain, but it came from a throat that was definitely not human. My stomach did a flip. Kelly grabbed my hand so hard I thought she might break a bone. We were both shaking. I felt a cold breeze pass through the camper, even though all the windows were closed. The air suddenly smelled rancid, like wet fur left out to rot. By now it had to be around 1:30 or 2 in the morning. That's when the entire camper shifted. I'm talking about a huge jolt, enough that my coffee mug on the little kitchen counter fell and clattered to the floor. It felt like something very large slammed into us from the side. Kelly let out a muffled scream, and I scrambled for a flashlight. In those frantic seconds, the sides of the camper started to creak, like 2 enormous hands were squeezing it from the outside. I'll never forget the fear that set in. It was like being trapped in a tin can with a monster prowling around you. I forced myself to crawl to the window above the sink. Peering through the tiny slit, I saw it, that tall shape that dwarfed any normal man. It had horns that curled back, sharp and menacing, and stood on 2 legs. A pair of glowing eyes stared right back at me, reflecting the dim porch light we'd left on. It was close enough that if I'd opened the window, it could have reached in. The worst part was the expression, or at least the impression, on its face. I swear it was smiling. Not a warm, friendly smile, but a grin that made my blood run cold. Suddenly, it stepped away from the camper, disappearing into the shadows of the tall pines. For a moment, I thought maybe it had left. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. But then, right when I was about to breathe a sigh of relief, we heard scratching sounds on the back panel of the camper. They were light at first, almost testing, and then they grew bolder, turning into deep gouges. It sounded like claws were digging into the metal, over and over, scraping, dragging, as if this creature wanted us to come out and see the damage it was causing. Kelly begged me to do something, but I had no plan. I had a small hunting knife and some bear spray, but I doubt either would have done much good against something that size. Suddenly, the whispering started again, but this time it was louder and more coherent. I couldn't make out exact words, yet it felt like an invitation, or maybe a threat, like it was daring me to come outside. There was a period of silence before the chanting hum started up once more, almost like it was circling the camper. The combination of these haunting sounds made me feel like my brain was going to snap. I've heard stories about cryptid sightings in remote areas, always brush them off as local legends or overactive imaginations. But let me tell you, nothing prepares you for the real thing. This felt cunning, like it was luring us out. It would knock on the door or tap on the window, then wait, as if expecting us to investigate. My mind drifted to old stories about trickster spirits and demonic beings. The idea that it might be a government cover-up or something park officials don't want widely known started to creep into my thoughts. I even recalled rumors from other campers about missing persons incidents that never seemed to get much press. Around 3 a.m., we heard the sound of branches snapping, much farther off into the woods, like the creature was moving away. Part of me wanted to run for the truck and speed off, but we were paralyzed by fear. The next thing we heard was a series of eerie calls from deep in the forest. They were answered by something else, somewhere off to the left. I can't be certain if it was wolves or if it was more of these things communicating with each other. The hair on my arm stood up, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there might be more than one out there. Then, something truly bizarre happened. The chanting came back, but this time it sounded distant, like it had moved away from our campsite. It was as if it wanted us to think it had left, so we'd come outside to see if the coast was clear. That's when I saw, through another small window, an odd glow in the woods. Not bright like a flashlight, more like a faint bluish shimmer hovering between the trees. Could it have been swamp gas or some kind of aurora effect? It didn't match anything I'd ever seen in the wild. And it kept pulsing, brightening and dimming, almost in rhythm with that droning hum. I swear, it looked like the creature was beckoning us to follow. Kelly and I held each other and just waited. Every instinct told me that stepping outside was the worst idea imaginable. Something about that glow and the chanting suggested a trap, like it was playing mind games with us. Maybe it assumed we'd be too curious or concerned to stay put. We didn't budge. We stayed as still as possible, heartbeats racing. Finally, the glow faded. The hum stopped. But just when I thought it was done, the creature came back. This time it pressed its face, or its muzzle, or whatever it was, right up against the side window. I saw its breath fog the glass. Its eyes were so close that I thought it might crack the window with just a push. That moment was pure terror. I could see every crease in its leathery skin, the unnatural shape of its brow, and those massive horns. Then, in a horrifying display, It licked the window, leaving a slick trail that dripped down the glass. I could barely contain a scream. After what felt like an eternity, it slowly stepped away, leaving only the echo of heavy breathing behind. By around 4:30 a.m., it seemed to lose interest or move on. We had no intention of relaxing or sleeping. We stayed up, hearts pounding, until the sun's first rays began to filter through the camper's small curtains. That's when I gathered the courage to peek outside. The forest looked calm and peaceful again, as if nothing had happened. But there were scratch marks on the metal of our camper, deep ones that couldn't have been made by a mere raccoon or bear. We wasted no time packing. Even though we were supposed to stay for a few more days, we wanted out of there. I remember driving past Old Faithful without even turning into the lot. We were too shaken to play tourist. We just kept driving until we were outside the park boundary. As I drove, all I could think about was how real the terror had been. I couldn't just chalk it up to a bad dream. And the more I replayed the events, the more convinced I became that there was a deliberate intelligence behind this creature, something that knew how to manipulate fear. For days afterward, I felt like I was in a fog, second-guessing what I saw, but the damage to the camper is real. Kelly and I can't deny the scratches, and neither of us can forget the way it seemed to whisper and moan, trying to lure us out. I sometimes wonder if other campers have experienced anything similar, but chose not to speak up, fearing ridicule or disbelief. The thought that such a horrifying cryptid might roam one of America's most famous national parks, preying on unsuspecting visitors, is beyond unsettling. I've asked myself if I should report this to the park rangers, but what would I say? We saw a giant horned creature that tried to coax us into the woods with chanting? It sounds insane. Yet, I can't dismiss what I saw with my own eyes. There are places in this country that feel haunted by more than just old memories. Take, for instance, a quiet corner of southwestern Pennsylvania, a region full of rolling hills and thick forests dotted with small towns that don't show up on many maps. It's the kind of area that, if you believe the whispers, has its fair share of hidden secrets. And one late summer evening, a man named Dave Young stumbled onto something so unsettling, it changed how he saw the world forever. My name is Dave, and I'm still trying to process what happened to me in southwestern Pennsylvania. I've been hiking and camping around the Laurel Highlands for most of my adult life. I know the trails like the back of my hand, places like Ohio Pyle, Laurel Ridge, even those old logging roads near the Chestnut Ridge that not many people bother exploring anymore. I've always felt comfortable out there, the thick canopy overhead, the sound of distant streams rolling over rocks. But now, every time I think about going back, my stomach tightens and a cold sweat breaks out on my forehead. Let me start from the beginning. I decided to take a week off work and do a bit of solo camping. I set my sights on a more remote area near Seven Springs, specifically not too far from County Line Road. It's a place I've camped before without any issues. The plan was to fish during the day, then read by lantern light at night. I brought simple supplies, a sturdy tent, some dried food, water filtration kit, and a small propane stove. Friends kept telling me to bring extra bear spray since black bears have been spotted a lot more frequently this year. Turns out bears were the least of my worries. I set up camp around noon. The spot I picked was tucked away from the main path, a grassy clearing with just enough space to park my truck off-road. Weather was typical late summer heat, with those afternoon thunderstorms that roll in out of nowhere. I remember feeling happy as the day wound down, enjoying the chorus of crickets and tree frogs. I grilled a couple hot dogs, cleaned up, and settled into my tent. Around midnight, I woke up to the sound of what I assumed were coyotes yipping in the distance. It's not unusual around there. I rolled over and tried to get back to sleep. Then I heard a low, guttural howl, completely different from any coyote I've heard before. It was so deep that I felt it reverberate in my chest. I told myself it must be a large dog somewhere off in the woods, but something about it wasn't right. It had a strange rhythm, almost like a human moan that stretched and fell in a way you wouldn't expect from a normal canine. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't. It came again, closer this time, and then I heard movement around my campsite. Branches snapping, leaves rustling. I've run into deer at night that crash through the brush, but this sounded more deliberate, like something or someone walking carefully around my tent. I grabbed my flashlight, which was a pretty powerful one, and decided to shine it around. I poked my head out of the tent, heart thumping. The forest around me looked normal enough, except the undergrowth to the west of my clearing was trembling like something big was moving behind it. Then I saw a pair of eyes. They were yellowish, reflecting the beam of my flashlight. Normally, you see that glint off an animal's eyes, like deer eyes shining green, or raccoons shining more yellow. But these were set higher off the ground than I expected. It was like looking into the eyes of a creature that stood on 2 legs, not 4. I'd say it was well over 6 feet tall. Fear gripped me. I pulled my head back into the tent, zipped it up quickly, and practically held my breath. I heard this sort of soft panting, almost like a dog excitedly sniffing around. Except there was something oddly human about it. The next thing I knew, the outside of my tent was rustling. Whatever this was, it walked right up and pressed against the fabric. I could see a vague shape, definitely tall, with some kind of snout protruding. My mind was screaming bear, but the outline was all wrong. It had a narrower snout and broader shoulders, like a muscular man with an animal's head. I fumbled for my bear spray, hands shaking. Then I heard this bizarre, low growling noise right next to my ear. The tent wall was so thin, I felt like if I reached out, I'd touch it. I forced myself to unzip a corner of the tent just enough to spray if I had to, but before I could do anything, it moved away. I heard it step back into the woods. I took a moment to compose myself and decided that maybe I should just pack up and drive out. But part of me thought I might be overreacting. It was late. My mind could have been playing tricks. Then again, my gut said this wasn't normal. I peered out once more, shining the flashlight into the tree line. That's when I spotted it again, standing about 30 feet away between some tall pines. It was on 2 legs, hunched over slightly, with an unmistakable canine head. The eyes had a reflective glow, and I could see its ears twitch. In that moment, I realized it wasn't just a random animal. It almost felt like it was watching me, studying my actions. What truly unnerved me was the sense of intelligence I got from it. The more I looked, the more I could see that its limbs were shaped like a human's, but covered in thick fur. It raised one arm to move a branch out of its way, like a man would push aside a curtain. Then it locked eyes with me and growled softly, as if warning me not to come any closer. I froze. The standoff lasted maybe 15 seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. Suddenly, it bolted off into the darkness, covering ground at an incredible speed. I heard branches snapping in its wake. I was left standing there, flashlight trembling in my hand, wondering what on earth I had just seen. I started thinking about those stories I'd heard around campfires, tales of a Dogman or some shape-shifting creature lurking near the Appalachian Range. People always laughed about them, called them urban legends. But now, I wasn't so sure. I spent the next few hours wide awake, waiting for dawn. Every crunch of leaves, every hoot of an owl made me jump. I thought about turning on my truck headlights for the rest of the night, but I was too afraid that might attract it, or something else. My mind started going down the rabbit hole of local folklore, stories about the government ignoring certain strange sightings. Some folks claim the Chestnut Ridge is known for all kinds of odd events: UFO sightings, Bigfoot encounters, even rumored underground bunkers from old military projects. I always dismissed it as nonsense, but after that night, I've become more open to the idea that we don't know half of what's really out there. At first light, I hurriedly packed my gear, tossing it haphazardly into the truck. While I was loading up, I found claw marks on a nearby tree, about 5.5 feet off the ground. They were long and thin, like something with canine nails had raked across the bark. I also noticed footprints in the damp soil near the tent area, huge prints shaped somewhat like a paw, but elongated, almost like it was half paw, half foot. I didn't have the nerve to examine them closely. I just wanted to get out of there. On the drive back toward the main highway, I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see a large creature sprinting after me. I had this uneasy feeling that I was being watched, even as I passed the familiar turnoff near Hidden Valley and merged onto County Line Road. By the time I got onto the Pennsylvania Turnpike, I was still shaking. It wasn't until I reached home that I allowed myself to really breathe. It's been weeks since that incident, and I still have nightmares. I see those yellow eyes peering at me from the shadows. I haven't told many people because I'm worried they'll think I'm making it up or going crazy. But this encounter was too real, too vivid, to be a dream. Sometimes I wonder if there's a network of these dog-like creatures roaming the forests, unseen by most of us who camp or hike. The thought alone makes me uneasy, especially considering how many families visit those hills without suspecting a thing. If anyone else has had a similar experience in the Laurel Highlands or anywhere near southwestern Pennsylvania, maybe it can help piece together what we're dealing with. I don't claim to have all the answers. I just know my eyes weren't playing tricks that night. I'm sending this out in hopes that I'm not alone. If you're out there camping in that region, be careful. Keep your eyes open, especially after dark. Somewhere along the quiet roads of West Virginia, people whisper about more than just small-town secrets. For one traveler, a late-night drive ended with a sight he never expected, and it changed his life in ways he still struggles to explain. The following account offers a glimpse into a realm that sits at the edge of what we think we know, waiting for those unlucky enough to cross its path. Now, listen closely to this horrifying encounter. I'd like to share something that happened to me. On a Friday night, I was driving through Point Pleasant, West Virginia. I had just finished a long day's work in Huntington and was looking forward to visiting a friend who lives out past the old TNT area. He's the type who likes solitude, so he rented a small place near the woods, not too far from the ruins of some abandoned bunkers. I should mention I've driven these back roads a bunch of times. They're mostly calm, with few cars passing late at night. The moon was out, but the road was dark. I had a bit of a chill running down my spine, though I blamed it on a cold front that came through earlier. I stopped briefly at a convenience store to grab a soda before continuing. For a moment, I overheard an older gentleman telling the clerk about strange lights he saw near the old riverbanks. At the time, I brushed it off, thinking maybe the guy had been drinking or just liked to tell tall tales. Little did I know I would be rethinking that soon enough. Around 10:30 p.m., I was only a few miles from my friend's place when my radio started crackling. First, I thought it was just some reception issue. Then I realized my headlights started to flicker. My truck is only a couple years old, so this worried me. Suddenly, the engine sputtered and I had to pull over to the shoulder. I popped the hood to see if any cables were loose. Nothing seemed out of place, but a wave of unease came over me. The woods to my right felt oddly silent. No crickets, no wind, nothing. Like nature was holding its breath. That's when I heard a fluttering noise above me. It was a heavy, flapping sound, like giant wings beating against the air. I pointed my flashlight up, but I couldn't see anything at first. Then I caught a glimpse of something moving between the trees, a shape bigger than any bird I've known in these parts. My mind raced through possibilities: an owl, a hawk, or even a crane. But the size was just wrong. It was too large, almost man-sized. I got back in the truck, locked the doors, and tried to start it again. The engine turned over this time without trouble, which was weird. As I eased back onto the road, I saw a sudden movement in my headlights. Standing by the tree line was a tall figure with what looked like folded wings. It had a broad chest, a slight hunch, and a pair of glowing red eyes that reflected the light. The face wasn't detailed like a person's. It was more like a smooth shape with those two eyes shining back. I can't fully describe the cold fear that hit me. It's like my body froze, and my mind went blank, just staring at this thing. There are old stories about a winged creature from this area, but I'd never put much stock in them. All at once, I started remembering bits and pieces about the so-called Mothman sightings, how they began in the mid-1960s, and how some folks tie them to the Silver Bridge collapse in 1967. People say the creature is either a warning or a bad omen. I used to consider those stories old myths, but now I was face to face with something that didn't belong in any normal explanation. Without warning, it opened its wings with a loud whoosh and disappeared into the dark sky, heading toward the river. My headlights caught a glimpse of a wide wingspan, maybe 10 to 12 feet across. Then it was gone, just like that. I sat there, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I pressed the gas pedal, desperate to get out of that spot. My hands were shaking on the wheel. The road felt like it was stretching out longer than usual, and I realized I was sweating despite the cool night air. When I finally reached my friend's driveway, I nearly skidded to a stop. I spent a few minutes outside the truck, gathering my thoughts. I remember telling myself to calm down, that I might have imagined details because of stress or exhaustion, but the encounter felt too real. Then I noticed scratch marks on the side of my truck near the rear panel. Long, thin scrapes that hadn't been there before. I ran my fingers over them and felt this chill again, like invisible eyes were on me. Inside my friend's house, I tried to explain what I'd seen. He suggested maybe it was a big crane or a heron that got startled, but I pointed out the red eyes, the wide wings, and how it stood upright. I also mentioned that weird, silent moment in the woods and how the truck's electronics acted up. He just looked at me with a mix of disbelief and concern, wondering if I was okay. That night, I hardly slept. The next day, we drove back toward the spot in his car, hoping to find some logical explanation. We saw nothing unusual. No footprints, no feathers, no sign of any large bird. But I couldn't shake the sensation that we were being watched from somewhere above. I kept scanning the treetops, expecting to see those red eyes at any moment. Every so often we heard distant rustling from the branches, but nothing showed itself. A few days later, I started going down a rabbit hole of local reports, digging up old news articles on sightings in Point Pleasant. Some described a large winged figure with red eyes appearing right before major disasters. Others said it was a spirit or an angel of doom. I never used to be the type to believe in these things, but after my experience, I'm not so sure we have the whole story. There might be forces at work that we can't easily explain. Even now, my truck occasionally acts funny, the lights flickering for a second when I drive through certain areas with dense forest. It could be nothing. Or maybe it's a reminder that something out there reached out and touched the normal flow of my life that night. The worst part is the nightmares. I keep dreaming of standing on a bridge at night, hearing the flapping of giant wings behind me. When I turn around, those red eyes are right there, staring deep into my soul. I'm writing this because I need to share it with someone who will at least consider my story without outright mocking me. If anyone else has seen something similar near the river or the old TNT area, I'd like to know I'm not alone. Maybe we can piece together a pattern, or at least find some comfort in knowing others have gone through the same thing. I'm still trying to make sense of it all. And so, another strange encounter fades away. A trick of the mind, or something far more unsettling. That's for you to decide. Thank you so much for watching my stories. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your support is what keeps this channel going.